The wind howled as it swept through the cracked streets, carrying the scent of decay and forgotten memories. The city, as it was known, stood as a relic of a time long past, where buildings once stood proud and streets bustled with life. Now it was a hollow shell, where only shadows and whispers remained. The towering structures seemed to lean toward one another, as though in search of some long-lost secret, with no one left to reveal it. In the distance, the cries of ravens echoed through the dismal sky, a reminder of nature reclaiming its territory. At the very edge of this desolate place stood a lone figure, perched high on a rocky outcrop. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon with a focused intensity that betrayed his youth. His name was Nokotan, a boy who, though seemingly unremarkable in stature and appearance, carried the weight of a legacy on his shoulders. A legacy few could understand, few would believe. The bloodline he descended from was one not of ordinary humans, but of dear human hybrids, a long-forgotten species that once roamed free and untamed in the heart of nature. For generations, the Deer Club had kept their existence a secret, hidden away from the world. It was a simple creed: to protect, to hide, and to watch over the balance of nature. But Nokotan's fate was already sealed. He was different. The blood within him stirred restlessly, calling to something greater. "Is he really coming?" Nokotan muttered to himself, eyes narrowing as he felt the shift in the air. The ground trembled beneath his feet, the subtle rumbling a warning. It wasn't the kind of vibration you'd expect from the tremors of an earthquake, but something deeper, darker, a force that felt like it could crush the very earth itself. He turned his head slightly, sensing movement from the shadows, a ripple in the atmosphere. It felt unnatural. From the corners of his eyes, he saw Bashame step out from behind a ruined column, his body cloaked in a veil of shadows. His dark eyes met Nokotan's with a wordless warning. Bashame was always the first to sense danger, a skill that had saved them all countless times before. His face was calm, but the tension in his posture told a different story. "We're not alone. He's here." Nokotan nodded silently. The presence was unmistakable now. It was the kind of power that made your hair stand on end, the kind that seeped into your bones and made your instincts scream for you to run. But Nokotan didn't run. He never ran. Behind him, Tarako Koshi emerged, a rare smile playing on her lips. Her eyes, always calculating, flicked toward the horizon. Her sharp mind had already analyzed the situation, predicting the battle that was about to unfold. She was the strategist of their group, a master of tactics and planning. But even she understood that some battles could not be won through mere intelligence alone. "No use hiding, then. We prepared for this day. Let's give him a fight." The three of them stood together on the cliff's edge, united by a single purpose: to protect their home, their people, and the legacy that had been passed down to them. The Deer Club was no ordinary organization. It was a brotherhood of protectors, bound by blood, a lineage that could trace its roots back centuries. But now their greatest challenge had arrived, and it was more dangerous than anything they could have anticipated. Dio. The name echoed in the wind, a whispered promise of destruction. Nokotan felt it then, the oppressive presence that had been hanging in the air for what felt like hours. It was no longer a faint sensation. It was real. It was coming, and nothing could stop it. A dark figure materialized in the distance, moving effortlessly through the shadows. The atmosphere seemed to bend around him, his very presence distorting reality itself. He was tall, regal, exuding an aura of absolute dominance. Dio. Nokotan's heart skipped a beat. He had heard the legends, but seeing the man in the flesh was something else entirely.
Dio was a being of unimaginable power, a creature who had transcended the boundaries of human and animal. His form was immaculate, his white suit pristine, his skin pale and almost glowing under the fading sunlight. His sharp features were almost too perfect, too symmetrical, as if he had been sculpted by some higher force. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling confidence, as though he were the king of the world. "You're a long way from home," Dio said, his voice smooth like liquid ice. "The Deer Club, what a quaint little organization, but your time has come." Nokotan's heart skipped a beat. He had heard the legends, but seeing the man in the flesh was something else entirely. Dio was a being of unimaginable power, a creature who had transcended the boundaries of human and animal. His form was immaculate, his white suit pristine, his skin pale and almost glowing under the fading sunlight. His sharp features were almost too perfect, too symmetrical, as if he had been sculpted by some higher force. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling confidence, as though he were the king of the world. "Foolish child," Dio said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think you can defeat me? You think your pitiful little club can stand against the might of the world?" With a single movement, Dio raised his hand, and the air around them seemed to distort, crackling with energy. A pulse of dark energy erupted from his body, sending shock waves through the ground. The force of it made Nokotan stumble back, his knees buckling slightly as the world around him seemed to distort. But he didn't fall. Instead, he dug his heels into the ground, feeling the earth beneath him, the rhythm of nature calling to him, urging him to stand firm. "The world," Nokotan muttered under his breath. He had heard rumors of Dio's stand, a power so devastating it could bend time itself. But what did it really mean, and how could he possibly fight something so overwhelming? "Enough talk," Dio said, snapping his fingers. The world seemed to stop. Time itself froze. Nokotan's breath caught in his throat as everything around him came to a standstill. The wind, the birds, even the beating of his own heart, it all vanished, leaving nothing but an eerie silence. Then Dio moved. In the blink of an eye, he was upon Nokotan. His movements were impossibly fast, a blur of motion that made it feel as though Dio were everywhere at once. He lunged at Nokotan, his fist colliding with the air in front of him. The pressure from the impact sent ripples through the frozen world, distorting reality itself. Nokotan barely managed to dodge, his instincts kicking in as he sidestepped at the last moment. But Dio's reach was infinite, and he would not be spared. Before Nokotan could react, Dio's foot collided with his chest, sending him flying backward into a nearby wall. The impact cracked the stone, and for a moment, Nokotan saw stars. This wasn't a fight, it was a massacre. "Pathetic," Dio said, his voice calm and cold as he stepped toward the injured boy. Nokotan's vision blurred, but his resolve didn't waver. No, he wouldn't let it end like this. The Deer Club was built on the strength of its bonds, its ideals. It wasn't just about raw power. It was about heart, about fighting for something greater than yourself. "I won't give up," Nokotan growled through gritted teeth, his body aching from the brutal blow. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled again. The natural world seemed to respond to his will. From the earth itself, the spirit of the deer rose, an ancient energy that surged through Nokotan's veins. It was a power that he had yet to fully understand, a power hidden deep within him, but it was awakening now, responding to the call. Dio's eyes narrowed as he sensed the shift. What is this? The air around Nokotan crackled with newfound energy. The earth beneath his feet seemed to come alive, responding to every move, feeding him strength. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was something more. I am Nokotan, son of the Deer Clan, and I won't let you destroy everything I love, he roared, rising to his feet, his body glowing with newfound power. And just like that, the battle was far from over. Chapter 2. Dio's Challenge. The air hung thick with the remnants of Dio's power. The world was still, like a deep breath held too long, the tension palpable in every fiber of reality. The first blow had been struck, but Nokotan could feel it. The true battle hadn't even started yet. His heart pounded in his chest, his legs unsteady beneath him. He had been thrown into the abyss of power, and the light at the end of it seemed distant, unreachable. The earth beneath him trembled again. He felt the pulse of life course through the ground, the resonance of his ancestry awakening within him. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Dio's eyes narrowed as he sensed the shift. What is this? The air around Nokotan crackled with newfound energy. The earth beneath his feet seemed to come alive, responding to every move, feeding him strength. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was something more. I am Nokotan, son of the Deer Clan, and I won't let you destroy everything I love, he roared, rising to his feet, his body glowing with newfound power. And just like that, the battle was far from over. Chapter 2. Dio's Challenge. The air hung thick with the remnants of Dio's power. The world was still, like a deep breath held too long, the tension palpable in every fiber of reality. The first blow had been struck, but Nokotan could feel it. The true battle hadn't even started yet. His heart pounded in his chest, his legs unsteady beneath him. He had been thrown into the abyss of power, and the light at the end of it seemed distant, unreachable. The earth beneath him trembled again. He felt the pulse of life course through the ground, the resonance of his ancestry awakening within him. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Dio stood a few paces away, his eyes gleaming with amusement. The smile on his lips was cold, like the smile of a predator about to close in for the kill. He was unfazed by Dio's defiance, his stance calm and unbothered, as if this was all just a small diversion in his grand plan. Is that all you've got, child? Dio's voice rang out, cruel and mocking. Pathetic. You've only just begun to scratch the surface of your potential, but you still lack the one thing that truly matters. Nokotan gritted his teeth, pushing himself to stand tall despite the pain racking his body. He could feel the invisible weight of Dio's gaze on him, a pressure that threatened to crush him under its intensity. But his eyes narrowed with defiance. He wasn't backing down, not this time. What are you talking about? Nokotan spat, wiping the blood from his lips. He was struggling to keep his footing, but he wasn't going to show weakness, not now. Dio chuckled, an unsettling sound that sent a shiver down Nokotan's spine. You think power alone will save you? No, Nokotan. Power is nothing without control, without understanding. You have the blood of the deer, yes, but you haven't even begun to understand its true potential. And as for your pathetic deer club, they can't help you now. Nokotan's fists tightened. The mention of the deer club, his comrades, his family, sent a spark of anger through him. He couldn't let Dio mock them, not after everything they had done for him. I'll make you regret underestimating me, Nokotan growled, his voice rising with the intensity of his will.
The Deer Club doesn't need your approval to be strong. We fight for each other, and I'll never stop fighting." "Oh, I do admire your spirit," Dio said with a dark grin. "But spirit alone won't save you. It's time to show you the difference between true power and the false hope you cling to." Without warning, Dio raised his hand once more, and the air itself seemed to warp as his stand, the world, made its presence felt. A faint ripple in space followed by the impossible. A freeze. Time itself stopped. Again. Nokotan's body froze, his heart skipping a beat. The familiar sensation gripped him, but this time it felt different. The air was heavy, thick with Dio's control. He couldn't move. He couldn't even breathe. Dio casually stepped toward him, his movements deliberate, unfazed by the boy's struggles. Every step seemed to echo in the stillness, his presence suffocating as it filled the void of stopped time. "You see, Nokotan, this is the power I command. The world, the ability to stop time, to exist outside the flow of the universe. You are nothing in comparison."
Nokotan's body shook, his mind racing. He had felt the time stop before, but this felt like a death sentence. How was he supposed to fight something like this? He had no power to move, no way to fight back. Time itself had become his enemy. But in the midst of his panic, a spark ignited within him. The blood of his ancestors surged through his veins again. The spirit of the deer, the one who had been calling to him from deep within, refused to let him give up. Nokotan could feel it, the primal energy of the earth pulsing, just waiting to be used. He just had to unlock it. Nokotan closed his eyes, willing himself to calm down. Time might have stopped around him, but that didn't mean he was entirely helpless. He could still feel. He could still sense. The heartbeat of the world, the rhythm of life was still there. The wind, the earth, the trees, the very pulse of nature, everything was still moving, still alive. It wasn't frozen, not really. Only the human world had stopped. The Deer Club was tied to something far older, far deeper than the manipulation of time. Nature itself. Nokotan's eyes snapped open, determination burning in them. This was his answer. Not brute strength, not speed, willpower, understanding, the connection to the natural world that ran through him like a bloodline. With a powerful cry, he slammed his fist into the ground, summoning every ounce of strength and will he had left. The earth beneath him rumbled, the very foundation of the world seeming to shake with his force. For a fleeting second, the flow of time seemed to ripple. The world shuddered. Dio's eyes widened for a moment. What? And then the air around Nokotan exploded with force. The ground cracked and split as a surge of raw energy blasted upward, the very terrain around him warping. It was as though the earth itself was responding to his call. Time was still frozen, but Nokotan's spirit had broken through the barrier. His primal power, the spirit of the deer, had awakened in full. "You think you're the only one who can manipulate reality?" Nokotan's voice was steady, though his body trembled with exertion. He had no time to waste. He needed to move before Dio regained control. Dio, for the first time, seemed taken aback, his expression faltering. The air hummed with tension, and the world still stood still, yet Nokotan's power was undeniable. The deer hybrid's strength had finally broken through the layers of time. Dio clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing with a renewed fury. "Impressive, but it won't be enough. You have no idea what you're up against." Nokotan's breath quickened, but he stood tall, his back straight. I may not be, but I'm not alone, and I'll never stop fighting. With that, he charged forward, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him as the very world around him began to shift. The deer spirit's power flowed through him, faster than time itself, a force greater than Dio's freezing grasp. For a fleeting moment, Dio's eyes flickered in surprise. The Deer Club would not bow down to a tyrant, and Nokotan, no matter the odds, would never give up. End of Chapter 2. In this chapter, Dio's overwhelming power is put on full display, but Nokotan starts to realize that it's not just about raw strength. It's about understanding his connection to the earth and tapping into that hidden potential. This is the beginning of his evolution into a true threat to Dio. Chapter 3. Power of the Deer. The world was still frozen, time locked in place, held captive by Dio's incomprehensible power. But for the first time, Nokotan didn't feel entirely helpless. In the silence that enveloped the battlefield, he could hear his heartbeat, slow and steady, a rhythmic pulse that felt strangely comforting. The earth beneath him was warm, and in the midst of the chaos, he felt connected to something much greater than himself. It was as if the very ground was calling to him. He had always felt it, the pull, the quiet urge to listen, to feel the life around him. But today, the power of his Deer clan lineage surged within him like a tidal wave. The ancestors of his bloodline had always been connected to nature, their spirits intertwined with the world they fought to protect. And now it seemed that same connection was awakening inside him.
Dio's mocking voice cut through the silence. "Are you done pretending, Nokotan?" Dio said, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of disdain. "You can feel it, can't you? The weight of time pressing down on you, the futility of resistance. You think you can match me, but you can't even move while I control everything around you." Nokotan's eyes narrowed. The cold fear that had gripped his chest just moments before was starting to dissolve. He wasn't just a human. He wasn't just a deer. He was something new, something greater. His bloodline carried the ancient primal energy of the wild, and now that power was awakening. "Shut up," Nokotan said, through gritted teeth, his voice barely a whisper but full of conviction. "I won't listen to you. I've never listened to anyone." The ground beneath his feet began to pulse again, the earth responding to his will. But this time, it was different. Instead of simply tapping into his natural instincts, Nokotan began to focus. He could feel the life force of the trees, the wind, the animals all around him. It wasn't just the land that spoke to him, it was the entire ecosystem, alive, breathing, and powerful. Dio took a step forward, his eyes glowing with malicious amusement. "You think your connection to the earth will save you? You are nothing more than a small creature in this vast world. You are not a god. You are a deer." Something in Nokotan's chest tightened. A deer? A helpless, weak creature incapable of defending itself? The truth could not have been farther from the mark. "You're wrong." Nokotan's voice rang out with newfound certainty, echoing across the silent battlefield. "I may be part deer, but I'm so much more than that. And you don't understand what you're up against." With those words, Nokotan closed his eyes, focusing entirely on the earth beneath him, feeling the pulse of life, the flow of energy that connected all things. The deer-human hybrid bloodline that ran through him had always been a mystery. He had never understood its full potential, but now he did. It was powerful. It was ancient. It was the strength of the land itself.
In a flash of inspiration, Nokotan lifted his hands toward the sky, feeling the power of the earth beneath him responding to his call. He wasn't alone in this fight. He was part of something greater, a deep connection to the wild world of animals, plants, and the very forces of nature itself. Dio watched with narrowed eyes, a frown forming on his lips. "You're still not understanding. Your bond with nature is irrelevant. Time still belongs to me." But Nokotan wasn't listening. He wasn't just drawing from the land anymore. He had tapped into something far deeper, a primal force that transcended Dio's manipulation of time. His body crackled with energy, his veins glowing with the power that surged through him. The very air around him seemed to tremble with anticipation. And then it happened. With a deafening roar, Nokotan's form shifted. The transformation was subtle at first, a gentle shift in the air, but it was unmistakable. His limbs grew more powerful, his senses sharper. His skin seemed to glow with an ethereal light, and the air around him crackled with the very force of his connection to the earth. His eyes glowed with an intense golden hue, the essence of a wild creature, a deer, a predator, a protector, awakened. The ground beneath his feet exploded, sending a shockwave rippling outward as the natural energy surged through him. The time freeze wavered ever so slightly, a crack in Dio's control, as if even the fabric of time itself was unable to contain Nokotan's newfound strength. Dio's expression shifted, a flash of concern crossing his face for the first time. What is this?" he murmured, his eyes flicking toward the source of the energy. Nokotan stood tall, now fully transformed, his body glowing with the power of nature itself. He had become something more than a mere boy, a being who embraced the wild, who could call upon the ancient power of the earth and the spirit of the deer. His ancestors had passed this power down, and now it was his to command. "I'm not just some deer," Nokotan said, his voice deep and resonant, filled with the raw power of his transformation. "I'm the protector of this world, and I will fight for it." With that, Nokotan's body shot forward, moving faster than before. The time-stopped world was still frozen, but his mind and body operated in perfect sync with the natural flow of life. He felt the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, guiding him, protecting him as he charged toward Dio. Dio stood unmoving, but Nokotan could feel the tension building between them. The air crackled with energy, a battle of wills that could shake the very foundations of the world. Nokotan's fists clenched, and with a cry he struck. The ground beneath him shattered with the force of his blow, sending shockwaves through the frozen landscape. The trees trembled as the force of his punch reverberated through the world, and for a moment, time itself seemed to hesitate.
Dio's eyes widened. Impossible! But it wasn't impossible. Nokotan's transformation had unlocked a power that no one, least of all Dio, could have predicted. He was no longer the weak boy from the deer club. He was the deer, a force of nature, a protector of the earth. Dio raised his hand, his time-stop ability flaring once more, but this time Nokotan was ready. He had anticipated the move. The world around him shifted, not in a way that obeyed Dio's time manipulation, but in a way that responded to Nokotan's will. "The world may stop time," Nokotan said, his voice now a low growl, "but the world itself moves without your command." In a flash, Nokotan's deer spirit surged, his senses sharpened. He could feel the pulse of Dio's stand, and in that split second, he knew exactly what to do. He slammed his fist into the ground again, calling upon the earth's power once more. The time freeze cracked again, the moment stretching thin. Nokotan was no longer frozen in place. He was moving in sync with the flow of nature, faster than Dio could react. And as he charged forward, he reached out for the moment of truth, the clash that would change everything.
The world around them was still frozen, locked in Dio's icy grip. But in Nokotan's mind, time was a different story. His body pulsed with energy, a living, breathing extension of the natural world. The spirit of the deer surged within him, and with every heartbeat, his understanding of his powers deepened. He was no longer just a young man fighting for survival. He was a force of nature, an embodiment of the wild, and he could feel it. He was one with the earth. But Dio wasn't just any enemy. This was a being who had transcended time itself, a creature who had bent reality to his will and destroyed those who had stood before him. Nokotan could feel the weight of that power pressing down on him, and yet he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Dio watched him intently, his cold eyes studying every movement with calculating precision. The space between them seemed to vibrate with tension, like the very air was holding its breath. You think you've unlocked some hidden power, but you still failed to grasp the truth, Dio said, his voice a calm whisper that echoed through the silence. Your connection to nature is nothing but a child's fantasy. You cannot defeat me, not with the power of the deer alone. You are still a mere boy, clinging to your wild instinct. Nokotan's expression hardened. He didn't respond. Words were useless against an opponent like Dio. It was time to show him. He raised his hands once more, and the earth beneath him trembled in response. But Dio wasn't intimidated. He raised a hand, the time-stop ability flaring again. The world around Nokotan began to slow, the familiar sensation of time freezing creeping over him like a vice tightening around his chest. Once again you will fall victim to the true power of the world. Nokotan gritted his teeth, and for a moment the world around him came to a halt. Time itself stopped again. But unlike the first time, Nokotan didn't panic. He knew what Dio was doing. He could feel it. The tempo of the world had shifted, and he could sense a ripple in Dio's control. It wasn't perfect. There was a weakness. Nokotan narrowed his eyes and allowed himself to breathe. He focused on his connection to the earth, to the pulse of life that still flowed beneath the frozen surface. The trees, the wind, the ground, all of them were still moving, still alive in a way that Dio couldn't stop. His primal instinct surged through him as his legs shifted into a stance of balance. The wisdom of his ancestors guided him. He moved, not in time, but with it. Dio's expression faltered as he watched the boy's body shift through the frozen landscape like a phantom, moving in perfect harmony with the rhythm of nature. For a brief moment, it seemed as if Nokotan had broken through Dio's power, bent it to his will. I can feel it, Nokotan murmured under his breath. I can feel your time stop. You're trying to manipulate everything around me, but the world doesn't stop. It never stops. Dio clenched his jaw, eyes narrowing. His stance shifted slightly, and his hand began to glow with an eerie light. The world wasn't just a stand of time manipulation. It was something more, something greater. You think you can dance around my power, Dio sneered. You are still nothing more than an insect caught in the webs of my design. Let me show you the true power of time. With a flick of his wrist, the world surged forward, and the air around Nokotan seemed to warp in a sickening pulse. Time shift. In an instant, Dio altered the flow of time itself, sending Nokotan back several seconds, as if the universe had been rewound. Before Nokotan could react, Dio was upon him. His fist slammed into Nokotan's side, the force sending the boy crashing into the ground. The impact rattled his bones, but Nokotan fought to regain his footing.
You still don't understand. Dio's voice was a low growl. I control time, boy. You cannot fight a force you don't even understand. Nokotan's breath was labored, but his mind was clear. He could feel the deer spirit calling to him, urging him to dig deeper, to learn from the fight. This wasn't just about raw power, it was about strategy. Nokotan's eyes flicked toward the terrain, his instincts kicking in. The answer was right in front of him. If he could just breathe, just for a moment, and think. He closed his eyes, tuning out the chaos, focusing on the stillness within him. Then he struck. With a burst of speed, he dove into a nearby rock formation, using it as a shield. As Dio's time shift moved again, Nokotan adapted, shifting the very flow of his own movements to match the rhythm of time as it rewound. For a brief moment, the battle was at a standstill, neither combatant able to land a decisive blow. Dio snarled in frustration. "This isn't over. Not yet, child." But Nokotan knew what this moment meant. Dio had underestimated him. "You are right," Nokotan said, rising from the rubble, his voice steady. "I don't understand everything about your power, but I do understand one thing. I am not you, and you will never control me." A flash of realization crossed Dio's face. It wasn't the power that made Nokotan dangerous, it was the will. The ability to adapt, to fight in the face of overwhelming odds. Dio had been relying on the inability of his opponents to see beyond their own weaknesses, but Nokotan was different. He wasn't just relying on instinct, he was learning, evolving, and using every advantage he had. "You may be powerful, Dio," Nokotan said, his voice low but full of resolve. "But I'm not alone." Bashame and Tarako Koshi stepped forward from the shadows, their forms barely visible against the glowing background of the battlefield. Despite the chaos of the battle, they stood unwavering, watching, waiting. "You've underestimated the Deer Club," Tarako said, her voice laced with calm strategy. "We're not just here to survive. We're here to win." Dio's eyes flicked toward the two of them, and for a fleeting moment a shadow of doubt crossed his features, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by a dark grin. "More pawns to sacrifice, I suppose," he said, raising his hand once more. But Nokotan was ready now. His body was charged with the energy of the earth, his mind sharper than ever. He had a plan. With a shout, he leapt into the air, his movements fluid and graceful as his body responded to the pulse of the world beneath him. His foot slammed into the side of the rock formation, launching him forward toward Dio with the force of a charging stag. As Dio's time shift moved again, Nokotan adapted, shifting the very flow of his own movements to match the rhythm of time as it rewound. Dio's eyes widened in surprise, but he wasn't fast enough. Nokotan's fist collided with the world, and the ground beneath them exploded with energy. The collision wasn't just physical. It was the meeting of two wills, two forces of nature. The battle wasn't over, not yet, but Nokotan was beginning to see that his greatest strength wasn't his power or his ability to fight. It was his ability to adapt. The Deer Club is not just a group of warriors. It's a brotherhood that fights together, and their bond is something Dio cannot break. The silence was deafening. In the wake of their brutal clash, the world seemed to stand still. No birds calling in the distance, no wind rustling through the trees. All that remained was the oppressive pressure of Dio's overwhelming presence. But even in this oppressive stillness, Nokotan stood firm. His body was battered and bruised, but his resolve was unshaken. Dio stood across from him, a figure of perfection, his white suit still immaculate despite the chaos around him. His eyes gleamed with dangerous amusement, but there was something else there, something like frustration. He'd underestimated the boy who was part deer, part human, but now something more. You truly are a puzzle," Dio muttered, his voice laced with both admiration and annoyance. "I've never encountered someone who could adapt like you. But let me make one thing clear, Nokotan. You are out of your depth." Nokotan's expression hardened. He was not backing down. No matter how many times Dio struck him, no matter how many moments he felt his body giving way, he would never stop fighting.
"I don't need to understand all of your powers," Nokotan said through gritted teeth, his body still trembling from the exertion. "But one thing I do know. I'm not going to let you hurt anyone else." Dio's lips curled into a smile, but it was cold and predatory. "Oh? And how will you stop me? You don't even know what you're up against, boy." Nokotan's fists clenched at his sides. The pain in his body was almost unbearable, but his deer spirit still pulsed within him, urging him to stand tall. He felt it, the strength of his ancestors, the wildness of the world. It wasn't just a physical force. It was a will to survive, a will to protect. He glanced over his shoulder at Torako and Bashami. They had positioned themselves strategically, their expressions unwavering, silently offering him support. It wasn't just his fight. It was their fight. The Deer Club had always fought together, and today would be no different. "Your time manipulation doesn't scare me anymore," Nokotan said, eyes narrowing. "I've seen through your game, and now I'm going to play it my way." Dio's lips flickered for a moment, as if he had expected more fear, more hesitation. But Nokotan wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He was more than just a boy with strange powers. He was a protector, a guardian of nature, and he would never let Dio destroy what he had sworn to protect. "You still don't get it," Dio said, his voice turning cold and dangerous. "You cannot defeat me. Not with your pitiful strength, not with your dear spirit. I am beyond time, beyond death. I've transcended everything you hold dear." He raised his hand again, and once more the world around them began to tremble. The time stop hit with an unrelenting force, freezing everything in its path. The trees, the earth, the very air itself, it all came to a halt. Nokotan's heart raced. He could feel it, the time stop, the oppressive grip of Dio's power closing in on him. But this time he was ready. With a deep breath, Nokotan focused, reaching deep within himself. He felt the pulse of the earth beneath him, the life force of the world. The deer spirit surged within him once more, its raw energy flooding his body. He could feel the energy, the rhythm of the world, and as Dio's time stop threatened to seize him once more, Nokotan broke through. The world froze, but Nokotan didn't. He had learned how to move outside the effects of Dio's power. He wasn't bound by the same rules. His connection to the earth, his bond with the deer spirit allowed him to bend time itself, to move freely in the moments when Dio's power held everything still. In the blink of an eye, Nokotan closed the distance between himself and Dio and struck with lightning speed. He caught Dio off guard, his fist connecting with the stand, the world, in a crash of energy that sent shockwaves rippling through the frozen air. Dio stumbled back, a rare flicker of surprise in his eyes. The force of the blow had shaken his confidence, and for a moment his arrogance wavered. "Impossible!" Dio spat, his voice low and filled with rage. "How are you—" "I told you," Nokotan said, his voice steady, his eyes burning with determination. "I won't stop fighting. I won't stop until I take you down." Dio's face twisted with fury. "You think you've won? You've only just begun to scratch the surface of my power." And then, just as Nokotan prepared to strike again, Dio's stand, the world, flared to life once more. The air around them trembled with energy as Dio released a burst of time-shifting power, sending a wave of raw force crashing toward Nokotan.
time rewound. For a brief instant, everything around Nokotan was thrown into reverse, the world flipping back on itself like a broken film reel. He felt his body jerk, the sensation of time being ripped away from him. But he refused to let it break him. With a roar, Nokotan thrust his hands forward, using the Earth's energy to stabilize himself. He anchored himself to the present, refusing to be sucked back into Dio's control. His feet dug into the ground, and with a forceful push, he launched himself back into the here and now, the weight of time pulling against him. "I won't lose," Nokotan said, his voice raw but determined. As he launched himself forward, he called upon the full strength of his deer spirit, the wild energy of the earth surging within him. He felt his connection to the deer club strengthening, each of them fighting alongside him in spirit. And he knew that the true key to victory wasn't just his power, it was the will to protect, to fight for what mattered most. In a flash, Nokotan's form blurred, moving faster than he ever had before. His body, now a blur of motion, crashed into Dio's stand once more, unleashing a burst of raw energy that shook the world to its core. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered, the very earth groaning in protest as the two forces collided. The shockwave from the impact sent ripples through the frozen time, the power of Nokotan's will breaking through Dio's control like a crack in a dam.
Dio's eyes whitened. He could feel it now, the change. Nokotan's power was more than just physical. It was a force that was undeniable, and no matter how much Dio tried to manipulate time, the world was beginning to bend in Nokotan's favor. "You think you can defeat me?" Dio said, his voice suddenly quieter, more dangerous. "You're playing with forces you don't understand, boy. The price of your defiance will be your life." Nokotan locked eyes with him, his expression fierce and resolute. "If that's the price of protecting the people I love, then I'll pay it." And with that, he charged. The air was thick with tension, vibrating with the energy of two forces locked in an epic battle. The world itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for one side to falter. Nokotan and Dio stood at opposite ends of the shattered battlefield, both bloodied, bruised, but far from broken. Time itself had become their battleground, an invisible force that both could control, but only one could truly master. Dio's eyes were narrow, his gaze cold and calculating. His white suit, pristine as always, contrasted sharply with the chaos around him, as if he were untouched by the world he had broken. Yet there was something different in his expression now, something that resembled unease. Nokotan stood tall, though his body screamed in pain. His chest rose and fell with each labored breath, but the fire in his eyes hadn't dimmed. He was no longer the unsure, frightened boy who had first confronted Dio. He had embraced his powers, understood his dear human hybrid nature, and forged an unbreakable bond with his ancestors' will. He was ready for what came next. "This is it, Dio," Nokotan said, his voice steady despite the weight of the battle. "I've learned everything I need to know, and I will not back down." Dio's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You still don't understand, boy. You can't fight me with willpower alone. I control time. I am the ultimate being, the pinnacle of existence. Your pitiful strength, your so-called deer spirit, cannot stand against me." Nokotan clenched his fists, his fingers digging into his palms. He could feel the pulse of the earth beneath him, the power of the deer spirit flowing through his veins like a river of raw, untapped potential. The strength of his ancestors, the courage of his friends, it all came together in this moment. "No one controls me, Dio," Nokotan said, his voice a low growl. "Not you, not time, and certainly not fate." The ground beneath them trembled, the very fabric of the world seeming to shift as if the universe itself had taken sides. Dio raised his hand, and once more the world flared to life. The air grew heavy with the weight of time itself, stretching and warping as Dio prepared to unleash his greatest attack. "This ends now," Dio roared, the power of his stand enveloping him. Time will freeze, and the world will bend to my will. Time snapped. The world came to a screeching halt. The trees, the mountains, the rivers, they were all frozen in place, their motion erased by Dio's godlike manipulation of time. But as the stillness enveloped him, Nokotan felt something different. He could still feel the pulse of the earth, the heartbeat of the world beneath the frozen surface. He wasn't frozen. He was still moving, still alive, still fighting. In a split second, Nokotan dove forward, propelled by the raw energy of the deer spirit that surged through him. His body blurred as he shifted through the frozen world, moving faster than even time itself could track. His instincts, honed by his connection to nature, allowed him to move freely through the time stop, to bend the world's rhythm to his advantage. Dio's eyes widened in shock. What? How are you? Before Dio could react, Nokotan struck.
His fist collided with the world, sending a shockwave that rattled the very core of the time stop. The stand buckled under the force of Nokotan's blow, the ground beneath them cracking open as the sheer power of his punch rippled outward. The energy of his strike was wild, untamed, and yet perfectly in sync with the pulse of nature itself. It was the power of a deer, yes, but it was also the power of a warrior, a protector, someone who would never surrender. Dio stumbled back, his expression shifting from surprise to rage. "Impossible! You can't break my time, my will!" But Nokotan wasn't done. With a roar, he called upon the full strength of his ancestor's spirit. The earth beneath him erupted in a surge of raw energy as Nokotan's body became a blur of motion, moving in sync with the very forces of the world. The deer spirit, the heartbeat of the earth, flowed through him like a river, wild, unstoppable, and all-encompassing. As Dio reached out to stop him, Nokotan dove toward him with the speed of a charging stag, his fist crackling with the energy of the deer spirit. He wasn't just attacking with his strength, he was attacking with everything, his will, his resolve, his connection to the earth. The world seemed to explode around them as Nokotan's fist slammed into Dio's stand, the world. The shockwave from the impact sent ripples through the frozen landscape, distorting reality itself. Dio's stand staggered, unable to contain the sheer force of Nokotan's assault. "No! No!" Dio screamed, his face contorting in rage. "You're nothing! I will make you bow before me!" But Nokotan wasn't done. With a final surge of power, he thrust his fist into Dio's core, striking with the full weight of the earth's pulse behind him. A shockwave of pure energy erupted, and the world shattered, crumbling under the sheer force of Nokotan's will. For a moment, everything was still, silent. And then, with an explosive crack, time itself shattered. The time stop broke, and the world began to move again. Dio stood there, his body trembling, his face twisted in disbelief. His once invincible form was now crumbling before him. His stand, the world, was gone, shattered beyond recognition. "No, no," Dio whispered, his voice barely audible. "This can't be." And then, with a final roar of defiance, Nokotan stepped forward, the strength of his ancestors flooding his body as he prepared for one last strike. "You will never control time, and you will never control the world," Nokotan said, his voice cold and resolute. "This ends now." With that, he raised his fist once more, and with the force of the deer spirit behind him, he struck. The battlefield was silent. The once shattered world, frozen in time and filled with chaos, was now slowly beginning to heal. The air, once thick with tension and violence, now felt light and free, almost as if the very atmosphere was breathing a sigh of relief. The earth beneath them, scarred and cracked from the battle, had begun to recover. Flowers began to bloom where the land had been torn asunder, and the trees, their branches once heavy with the weight of Dio's influence, swayed gently in the wind. Nokotan stood amidst the remains of the battlefield, his body still aching, but his heart
finally at peace. The battle had been fierce, more than he could have ever imagined, but it was over. Dio was gone, the world was shattered. The weight of the darkness that had loomed over them for so long was now lifted, and in its place there was only the soft hum of life returning to the world. "Is it over?" Bashame's voice broke the stillness, his tone uncertain but filled with hope. "It's over," Nokotan said, quietly, his eyes distant, his expression weary but resolute. "We did it." Behind him, Toriko Koshi stepped forward, her presence as steady and grounded as ever. The battle had changed them all, but she was proud of the strength that Nokotan had shown. They all had. They had all fought side by side, each of them pushing their limits in their own ways. "I never thought we'd actually make it this far. But you did it, Nokotan. You truly are something extraordinary." Nokotan turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of gratitude and humility. "We all did it. It wasn't just me. It was all of us. The Deer Club." Bashame nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, the Deer Club. Guess we're a bit stronger than we thought."
For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, the weight of their victory settling over them. The air smelled fresh, like spring after a long, harsh winter. The battle was over, and they had survived. But as Nokotan looked toward the horizon, he knew that victory was only part of the journey. Dio's defeat wasn't just about saving the world, it was about finding themselves along the way. The strength they had found in each other, the bonds that had formed between them, were far more important than any battle they had fought. They had learned what it meant to trust in one another, to fight for something greater than themselves. "I still can't believe it," Bashame said, his tone more reflective now. "We've come so far, but I think we've all changed. We're not the same people who walked into this fight." "That's true," Nokotan said, his gaze softening. "We've all grown. I've grown. I thought my strength came from my powers, from what I could do. But now I know that my real strength comes from who I fight for and the people I fight alongside." Toriko stepped up beside him, her voice serious but gentle. "It's the will to keep moving forward. That's what makes us stronger. Not just raw power, but the will to protect those we love." A soft breeze blew across the field, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers. The world was healing. And in the distance, Nokotan could see the shadows of the Deer Club's future, uncertain perhaps, but full of promise. Nokotan turned his gaze toward the setting sun, the golden light casting long shadows across the land. He could hear the distant call of birds, the rustling of trees, the whisper of life returning to the world. And he realized that no matter how hard the battles would get, this world, his world, was worth fighting for. "We've done it," Nokotan said softly, his voice filled with quiet determination. "But this is just the beginning." Toriko nodded, her expression a mixture of resolve and hope. "We'll face whatever comes next, together." Bashame gave a quick, short laugh. "Yeah, we've got a lot more fights ahead. But for now," he looked up at the sky, watching the clouds drift by, "let's enjoy the peace." The three of them stood together, watching as the world around them slowly came back to life, the weight of their victory settling in and the possibilities of the future unfolding before them. There was still so much to do, so many adventures waiting to be had, but for now, in this moment, they had earned their peace. And the Deer Club had proven that no matter the odds, they would always rise to protect the world they loved.